mission that built our nation now tears it apart. A minor skirmish that starts by accident explodes into the deadliest battle ever fought on U.S. soil. Two American armies face off in a small Pennsylvania farm town. Soon 50,000 will be dead, wounded, or missing. This is the story of 8 men who fight here, and 3 days that change America forever. After the start of the Civil War, the Confederate Army is invading the North. 1 mile west of Gettysburg, rebel reconnaissance troops encounter Union resistance. The fight escalates out of control. Gettysburg. Day 1, 10 a.m. "24-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Rufus Dawes leads the 6th Wisconsin Regiment of the Iron Brigade. These are the crack troops of the Army of the Potomac. 420 volunteers from the western frontier. They faced down the Confederates at Antietam. They're rugged and battle-tested. The Confederates outnumber them 2 to 1, but Dawes and his men have them on the run. The retreating rebels find cover in a 600-foot railroad cut. The rebels now have the advantage.
I first mistook the maneuver for retreat, but was undeceived by the heavy fire, which they began at once to pour upon us from their cover in the cut.
For Dawes, retreat is not an option. Heroism runs in his family. His great-grandfather, William Dawes, rode with Paul Revere.
Of all the people that you didn't want to go up against on a battlefield like that was Rufus Dawes and his Westerners. Those Western troops were tough, and he was tough. More importantly, he was tough and experienced. There's no replacement for that on the battlefield.
Just 175 yards to the railroad cut. It will cost Dawes 1 man for every yard they advance.
The whole field behind is streaming with men, plunging in agony, sinking to death on the ground.
In the noise and thick smoke, Dawes must rely on the regimental flags, the colors, to command his troops. But flags are a magnet for enemy fire.
Men were being shot by the 20s and 30s. But the boys crowded in right and left towards the colors and went forward.
Dawes loses 10 men carrying the colors in a matter of minutes. Confederate flag is within the reach of his Iron Brigade men.
Corporal Eggleston sprang forward to seize it and was shot and mortally wounded. Private Anderson, furious at the killing of his brave young comrade, with a terrific blow split the skull of the rebel who had shot young Eggleston. Into this deadly melee came Corporal Francis A. Waller, who seized and held the rebel battle flag.
Throw down your muskets!
The fight is over in less than 20 minutes. There are 600 rebel dead, wounded, or missing. Dawes loses nearly half his men.
He's one of those rare soldiers that when everything else is chaotic, Dawes was able to find clarity. He's able to find purpose. He understands that his soldiers have to be inspired by his presence.
But Dawes' win at the railroad cut is the exception. All around Gettysburg, 28,000 rebel troops are overwhelming 20,000 Union soldiers. The Confederate force, 75,000 strong, is streaming towards Gettysburg. The Army of Northern Virginia is led by legendary battlefield commander Robert E. Lee. Lee's strategy: shift the fighting out of the South and into the North, threatening cities like Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. He runs into the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg. This is where they'll fight.
If you look at Gettysburg on a map, it looks like a wagon wheel almost, with the town in the center and all the spokes going out in all these different directions. The fact that Robert E. Lee and his troops ended up at Gettysburg was not what he wanted to happen at all. This battle started by accident, it started because of the roads, and as more troops arrived on these very roads, it escalated into the largest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere.
Having won a string of victories across the South, Lee's army invades the North at the peak of its strength.
One word would sum up Robert E. Lee's feeling in marching to Gettysburg, and that word is confident. They see the end of the tunnel. They can feel that if they maybe win in the North, that this war might finally end.
The moment was now in '63. Lee knew it, and he didn't want it to pass by.
What you got to remember is Lee is not there to win another battle. Robert E. Lee's there to win the war.
On the northern edge of Gettysburg, Union troops are taking a beating. All that stands between the town and the rebel assault is the 11th Corps. Among them, Sergeant Amos Humiston, ex-whaler, father of 3. He enlisted after hearing President Abraham Lincoln's plea for 300,000 recruits.
Amos Humiston was like so many Union soldiers who felt this deep love for family and for home, but he also had a deep sense of commitment for the Army and for his nation.
A bullet glanced off his ribs 6 weeks ago at Chancellorsville.
All I ask is I can die in battle like a man. But I hate the idea of dying here like a hog.
The odds are against him. Battering the 11th Corps from a hill above town is Lee's newly appointed Lieutenant General Dick Ewell. Tenacious, eccentric, profane. Ewell lost his left leg fighting the Iron Brigade last summer at the Second Battle of Bull Run. Now he's out for revenge. A month ago, Robert E. Lee's legendary second-in-command, Stonewall Jackson, was killed in battle. Ewell replaced him. It's a lot to live up to. But today, Ewell has the Union on the run. After suffering 9,000 casualties, Union soldiers retreat from Gettysburg. Humiston has orders to cover the retreat. But they're under heavy fire. By 4 p.m., his units outflanked and fall back into town. But they've got nowhere to go. Ewell's Confederate troops are spreading out through the town. It's a rout for the rebels. Amos Humiston is surrounded. He's in for the fight of his life. The Army of Northern Virginia is on a roll, mowing down Union troops with deadly precision. After just 10 hours of fighting, the Union's retreating. 9,000 already killed or wounded. The rebels are close to the victory Lee seeks.
Every battle that Lee fights, every victory that he wins, where he does not achieve the destruction of the Army of the Potomac, he just expended capital with no strategic effect. Lee knows the clock's ticking. He wants to stay on them so that he can destroy them.
Sergeant Amos Humiston puts his life on the line covering the Union retreat. Confederate troops have overrun the town. Of the 270 men in Humiston's regiment, all but 18 are killed, captured, or wounded. Humiston is trapped.
You have put the little ones to bed, dear wife, and covered them o'er with care. My Frankie, Allie, and Fred, and they have said their evening prayer. Perhaps they breathed the name of one who is far in southern land, and wished he too were there to join their little band. Oh, when will this rebellion cease? This cursed war be over? and we our dear ones meet, to part from them no more.
Across Gettysburg, terrified residents hide wherever they can, even in the town's bank vault. Others flee as the rebels swarm through town. Especially African Americans, to avoid being seized by the rebel army. Just 7 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line, Gettysburg is on the Underground Railroad, a route of safe houses for escaped slaves fleeing to the north. Their destination, cities like New York and Philadelphia, where supporters provide food and protection. If caught, reprisals are brutal. Ears chopped off, hamstrings cut. It's no wonder slaves are the single largest financial asset in the United States.
The enslaved population of the South, by itself, is worth more than all the railroads and factories and banks of the United States together.
It's a business worth more than $3.5 billion.
The wealth of the South is almost wholly dependent on enslaved persons.
Whether you're looking at states' rights, whether you're looking at political aspects of it, everything points back to slavery. Slavery is at the center of everything that caused the Civil War.
By nightfall, the Confederate flag is flying over Gettysburg. Homes and public buildings become makeshift hospitals to deal with the flood of casualties. Fannie Bueller, a housewife and mother, risks home and family, taking in wounded Union soldiers.
I never saw a more unsightly set of men, with their dirty, torn garments, hatless, shoeless, and footsore. I pitied them from the depth of my heart.
Until now, the bloody business of nursing has always been a male profession. But during the Civil War, 20,000 women sign on to care for the casualties. One Union nurse, Clara Barton, will go on to found the Red Cross. Rebel soldiers go door to door looking for Union soldiers. They're hiding all over town. Lee has nowhere to put prisoners. During the war, so many are captured that North and South follow an honor system. Paroled prisoners take an oath not to rejoin the fight until formally exchanged.
Parole is simply, I'm going to give you a piece of paper that says, don't fight anymore, and if I catch you fighting, then bad things are going to happen to you. Then what we're going to do later is we're going to have men from our army and men from your army meet at a neutral place, and we're going to trade soldiers just like kids sitting around trading playing cards. You know, I'll trade you 3 generals for 4 colonels and 9 lieutenants for 50 privates.
The punishment for breaking parole is death. Amos Humiston is wounded and alone in a yard in the middle of town. He grasps an ambrotype, a photographic image of his 3 children fixed in glass, a present from his wife on his way to war.
The Amos Humiston story is going to resonate with any soldier. If you go to any unit in the United States military today, obviously you're going to find service members with pictures of their children, their wives, their sweethearts, because that is a tangible link to your normal life. Your condition in combat is not normal. You're there in the service of your country to do what the nation asks you to do.
stakes are rising for both North and South. On the high ground outside town, Rufus Dawes and the Union Army dig in. It's here that the Battle of Gettysburg will be won or lost. Suffering heavy losses, Union troops pull out of Gettysburg, leaving the town in Confederate control.
It might appear that the fighting on the first day for the Union was a huge waste. They lost really bad on the first day. But the intense struggle they put up north and west of town, the intense struggle that some of them put up through the streets of Gettysburg, allowed them to fall back to their chosen position.
They retreat to a nearby series of hills that peak at 800 feet. High ground that gives the Union a critical military advantage. On Culp's Hill, Rufus Dawes and what's left of his Iron Brigade unit dig in. They have a new weapon, the shovel. They're building breastworks, a form of fortification dating back to the Romans. Some officers think defensive walls create cowards, not Dawes. After losing half his men, he wants all the protection he can get. Down below, Ewell has orders from Robert E. Lee to take Cemetery and Culp's Hills, but with the qualifier, if practicable. Ewell decides to wait for reinforcements. It's a decision with critical consequences.
If you're looking up and you're seeing this great amount of work going on up there, and your men are tired from the march they've just made and from the battle they've just fought, something in him triggered. I'm not going to do this, or I can't do this now, but certainly at the end of the day, he's going to disappoint his commander, and I'm sure he's going to disappoint himself. The Confederacy will pay for that for the next 3 days.
This is one of the great what-ifs of the battle. Had Ewell occupied and controlled Culp's Hill and the land around it, the Union Army would have simply had to leave, and the battle would have been fought somewhere else, maybe not so much to the Yankees' advantage.
In the fields around Gettysburg, a grim new harvest. The dead and wounded from day one. Tending to the injured on both sides, Dr. LeGrand Wilson, Confederate, deeply religious, hometown Jackson, Mississippi. Educated in the North, his family owns 40 slaves in Mississippi.
This was my first experience on the battlefield after the fighting. And it was horrible beyond description. If every human being could have witnessed the result of the mad passions of men I saw that night, war would cease. There would never be another battle.
The staggering level of death in the Civil War is difficult to wrap your brain around.
The commonly used numbers for how many soldiers died during the Civil War is between 620 and 630,000. Today, that would mean that we would lose 6 million American lives.
One innovation making this war so deadly, the mini-ball. 90% of the soldiers Wilson treats have mini-ball wounds. A hollow base and grooves stabilize its flight for better range and accuracy. On impact, it flattens out, causing much larger wounds than traditional musket balls. The warped bullet shatters bones that splinter and tear through the body. And the grooves in the bullet carry deadly bacteria leading to gangrene. The only way to stop it, amputation. African Americans serve as stretcher bearers. Some slaves use the invasion as a chance to escape. By the end of the war, 500,000 slaves flee to the north. 150,000 will enlist in the Union Army. Dr. Wilson loses a family member on the first day of battle.
Among the dead was my own nephew, Lieutenant George Adrian Howes, who must have been shot in the advance upon the enemy in the morning. His faithful servant, Stephen, came out on the battlefield and sought for and found his body, and carried it back to the hospital for burial.
Family members often serve side by side. It's one reason why they fight so hard.
In some states, a quarter or more of the military-aged men were dead as a result of the war, with hundreds of thousands more wounded. In some cases, all the young men of a town were wiped out during the Civil War.